Usually when we talk about like getting a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of absolute precision.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
almost like engineering. You fall, you break your arm, you go to the hospital, and the x-ray shows that jagged white line on the black background.
Exactly.
And the doctor just points to the screen and says, there it is, that's the problem.
It's completely binary, right? I mean, bone is broken or it isn't. And that visibility is inherently comforting, even if the injury hurts.
Yeah.
We really like things to be visible. We like problems to be neatly categorized in a way that we can just, point at them and apply a specific fix.
Yeah, but then you step into the world of enterprise digital architecture, and suddenly that beautiful, precise x-ray machine is just completely useless.
Oh, yeah. Totally useless.
Because you can't just point at a screen to see why a 10,000 person company is failing to communicate. We're looking at a structural landscape that is often just a completely tangled, messy web of disconnected systems, legacy software, and, well, shadow IT.
It is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters. I mean,
Yeah.
you have incredibly vital customer data siloed over in one system. You have team communication happening on an entirely different platform.
Right.
And then you have HR policies buried in some decades-old intranet site. And caught right in the middle of all this friction is the actual workforce, just, clicking frantically through a dozen browser tabs, trying to figure out how to get their basic daily tasks done.
Which brings us perfectly to the core mission of our deep dive today. We are taking a highly structured, intensely technical look at how to actually cure that specific enterprise disease.
Yes.
We are bypassing all the high-level generic corporate fluff today. We aren't here to talk about synergy.
Thank goodness.
Right. We are going to dig directly into the core architectural concepts, the fundamental SAP processes, and most importantly for you listening, the actual configurations required to master SAP Build Work Zone.
Because, look, understanding the theory of a unified workspace is fine, but understanding the actual application, like the nuts and bolts of how you wire it together, that is what actually moves the needle for an organization.
Right.
If you are the architect or the administrator, you need to know exactly what is happening under the hood. You have to take action.
Exactly. So to ground all this heavy technical theory, let's look at a very real-world scenario from our sources. We have this company called Weisers, Inc. They manufacture large-scale refrigeration systems.
Big, complex stuff.
Yeah, they sell incredibly complex components to global customers.
Yeah.
And inside this company, we have a guy named Nils. Nils is a customer service strategy manager, and frankly, Nils is drowning.
He's experiencing that exact digital fragmentation we just talked about.
Exactly. He is managing massive amounts of data related to potential and existing customers. He's fielding these complex, highly technical queries about refrigeration components. And on top of all the data overload, he feels completely isolated from his broader team. The daily task of just finding the right information is tedious, his productivity is completely tanking, and he is essentially reaching out to his boss, Michelle, for a lifeline.
And Michelle's solution, which is, being driven by the wider management team at Weezers, is to implement SAP Build Work Zone.
Okay, so what does that actually mean for Nils?
The promise they are making to Nils is that they're going to provide an employee-centric digital experience, a centralized, personalized, user-managed workspace that finally brings all those operational processes, the scattered data, and the isolated people into one single cohesive interface.
But to actually build that cohesive interface, you have to know precisely what you were doing. I mean, you can't just buy the software and expect it to magically organize your company, right?
Oh, absolutely not. It doesn't build itself.
Right. So as we walk through this architecture, we are going to focus heavily on the actual steps an administrator must take. We're going to look at the exact configurations and the critical architectural decisions you have to apply in your own environment to build a working solution for someone like Nils.
Because before you can invite Nils and his team into this shiny new digital workspace, before you can build the beautiful dashboard pages they interact with, you really have to pour the concrete foundation. You have to build the roads and paint the street signs, so to speak.
Okay, so as an architect looking at a completely blank slate, where is the very first place I actually go to start building those roads?
The very first step in this entire technical journey begins with your primary navigational architecture. And in the SAP Build Work Zone environment, this is called the site menu.
The site menu. Got it.
Yeah, it is the absolute cornerstone of user navigation. It is the gateway. It dictates exactly how users access their workspaces, their individual applications, and their informational work pages.
And if I mess up that directory,
If the site menu isn't structured correctly, with a logical hierarchy, absolutely nothing else you build will matter. You could build the most advanced AI-driven data dashboard in the entire world, but if Nils can't find it in the menu when he's on a live call with a frustrated customer, it effectively doesn't exist.
okay, so I log in as a company administrator and I navigate to the site menu configuration panel. What is the very first technical decision I have to make? Like, what's my first action item?
Your first major action item is purely structural. You have to dictate the layout of the menu itself, and you have two distinct options here. First is the horizontal menu. This is your classic top navigation, a bar that sits right across the top of the user screen.
Okay, pretty standard.
Right. The alternative is the vertical menu, which is a sidebar navigation that runs down the left side of the interface.
See, at first glance, that just sounds like an aesthetic choice. Like, does the company like their buttons on the top or on the left? Why would an architect choose one over the other?
It's actually not about aesthetics at all. I mean, it is entirely about scalability and cognitive load.
Yeah.
If you are configuring this for a relatively small, focused team that only needs access to, say, 5 or 6 main areas, the horizontal menu is great. It's traditional. It's out of the way.
Right, it looks clean.
Yeah. But let's say Weisers, Inc. scales up globally. Suddenly, that site menu needs to hold dozens of critical menu entries, nested folders, and departmental links.
Oh, yeah. If I put that on a horizontal menu, it's going to get incredibly cramped really fast.
Exactly. You end up forcing everything into these awkward cascading drop-down menus that are an absolute nightmare to navigate with a mouse. A vertical sidebar menu, on the other hand, is highly scalable.
Because you can just scroll.
Exactly. A sidebar can handle a massive, deeply nested list of entries much more cleanly because the user can just scroll vertically. It handles enterprise-scale complexity without breaking the visual design of the page.
Okay, so assuming I've analyzed the scale of my company and chosen the layout, I now have an empty menu. I have to start adding the actual links. And our sources define 4 very specific menu item types that every administrator must thoroughly understand to route traffic correctly.
Yes, the categorization here is vital for how the system handles the back-end routing. So as an admin, your next action item is configuring these specific types. The first menu item type you can configure is custom.
Custom. Okay, what does that do?
A custom menu item is basically your flexible wildcard. You use this when you need to link to a custom URL that exists entirely outside of the SAP environment, say a legacy vendor portal.
Okay.
Or you can use it to route internally directly to a specific standalone work page that you've stored within the site menu content area, rather than hiding it inside a specific team workspace.
Got it. So custom is exactly that. Custom routing to external or standalone stuff. What is the second type?
The second type is Workspace. This is a dedicated direct link to a collaborative area. We'll dive deep into how Workspaces actually function a little later, but from a routing perspective, this is how you put a permanent link on the main menu that routes a user directly to a highly secure project room or a departmental hub.
Like the global customer service hub for Nils.
Exactly. It's a direct door to that room.
Okay, the third type mentioned in the sources is the application menu item.
And this one is crucial for daily operations. An application menu item is a direct line to an individual software tool. That could be a standard, out-of-the-box SAP app, a custom-built enterprise solution, or even a third-party application that you have integrated into the platform.
So not a web page.
Right. When a user clicks this, they aren't going to a content page to read about something. They're launching a live operational tool.
Okay, and finally, we have the predefined menu items. So now these aren't links I'm building from scratch, right? These are system generated.
Correct. The SAP system automatically generates these predefined items to ensure users always have consistent access to the core functionalities of the platform. The prime examples are recommendations and the knowledge base.
But wait, how does a predefined link actually function differently than a custom link? Like, if I click knowledge base on the global menu, where am I actually going, considering every different department has its own knowledge base?
This is where the underlying architecture is really quite brilliant, actually. The company-wide predefined knowledge base isn't just a static link pointing to one single page. It acts as a dynamic aggregator.
What do you mean by aggregator?
Well, when Nils clicks that predefined link, the system looks at his specific user profile, it looks at every single workspace he has permission to access across the entire company, and it dynamically aggregates all the finalized articles from all those disparate areas into one unified searchable view. It pulls all the data up to his level automatically.
Oh, wow. That is incredibly powerful. He doesn't have to remember if the refrigeration manual is in the engineering workspace or the customer service workspace. The menu item just pulls it all together for him. Exactly. It breaks down the data silos right there at the navigational level. Now, there is a very specific configuration detail in our sources regarding the menu items that sounds almost trivial, but they emphasize it heavily as an action item. And that is icons. The sources state that assigning icons to these menu items is absolutely mandatory for a good user experience.
I know, it sounds like a cosmetic afterthought, right?
Yeah.
You're an enterprise architect. Why do you care about a little picture of a wrench?
Yeah.
But it is fundamentally about human psychology and enforcing visual hierarchy.
How so? Like, why does it matter that much?
Think about Nils again. He is on a live phone call. He has a highly agitated customer on the line demanding to know the pressure tolerance of a specific cooling unit. His adrenaline is up, he's stressed. When he glances at that vertical sidebar menu, he literally does not have the cognitive bandwidth to read a dense wall of text spanning 20 different links.
He needs to recognize patterns.
Exactly. He wants to see the little blue wrench icon for technical specs or the yellow folder icon for customer history and just instinctively click. It drastically reduces cognitive load. In enterprise software, forcing your users to read every single word on a navigation bar is a massive design failure. Icons create a fast lane for the human eye.
That makes total sense. Okay, now, there's a very specific administrative note in the sources regarding the home section of the menu. It says that if an organization is migrating from SAP Jam, or if they just require a highly customized landing page, the administrator must explicitly disable or replace the default home section. Why is the default home page a problem for a migration?
It comes down to how the legacy software functioned. In SAP Jam, there was a very heavy architectural reliance on the concept of home pages distributed across all sorts of internal and external areas. It's just, how that system organized the world. When SAP Build Work Zone was designed, they listed the predefined home section separately right out of the box, specifically to help administrators manage that conceptual transition from Jam.
But it's not strictly necessary if you aren't tied to that old structure.
Right. If you want absolute total control over the first thing Nils sees when he logs in at 8:00 a.m., you don't want the generic system default. You go in, you disable that predefined home link entirely. Then you build a highly customized work page from scratch filled with the exact dashboards and metrics Wiser's Inc. actually cares about, and you route your users there instead.
Okay, I understand the mechanics of building this menu, but I have to ask about the long-term reality of this. Let's imagine this site menu as the lobby director of a massive 100-story corporate skyscraper.
I like that analogy.
You walk in the front doors, you look at the digital board, and you need to know exactly what floor human resources is on, or where the IT help desk is located. If that directory is flawed, if it's full of outdated department names, confusing corporate acronyms, or it points to floors that are under construction, it absolutely does not matter how beautiful the offices upstairs are. Nobody's ever going to find them.
That is the perennial challenge of enterprise architecture. The menu becomes the bottleneck.
So, as an admin, how do you prevent this digital directory from becoming a cluttered, chaotic mess as the company scales? Because you know what's going to happen. The VP of marketing is going to demand their new app is on the main menu, and then the director of logistics is going to demand their tracking tool is on the main menu. If you just add them one by one in the live system, it's going to turn into unreadable chaos.
Which brings us to a critical, non-negotiable technical process for any administrator. And this is a massive learner action item. Transporting site menu configurations. You do not, under any circumstances, manage enterprise scalability by making ad hoc changes to the live production menu on a Tuesday afternoon.
So how do you manage it safely?
You introduce rigorous isolated version control. You build and test your ideal, streamlined site menu in a completely separate development or staging environment. You sit down with the stakeholders, you debate the hierarchy, you test the cognitive load of those icons we talked about, and you get it exactly right in a sandbox where mistakes don't impact the whole company.
And once it's perfect in the sandbox,
then you use the Site Manager tool to export that configuration. The system takes all those menu settings, all the structural hierarchy, all the routing logic for the applications and custom pages, and it packages it all into a secure transport file.
oh, and then you take that file and import it into the live production system.
Precisely. This lifecycle management ensures that the user experience remains perfectly consistent. It prevents scope creep. It ensures that no rogue administrator is just, manually adding a dozen unnecessary links to the live menu to appease a noisy department head. It enforces architectural discipline at the highest level.
Okay, so we've poured the foundation, we have our structural directory built in development, securely transported, and now it's live in production. The employees know exactly how to navigate the skyscraper. The very next step is that we actually have to construct the offices that these users will navigate to. We need to build the presentation layer.
And in SAP Build Work Zone, that presentation layer is known as the Workpages.
Workpages are described in the sources as highly customizable interactive layers. So, as an architect, I've got my menu pointing to a new page. I initialize a new work page. What am I actually looking at? Am I staring at raw HTML code?
No, not at all. You are looking at a visual page editor.
Yeah.
It is designed entirely as a no-code drag-and-drop experience.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, the goal is to empower administrators to build powerful interfaces without needing a computer science degree. However, it is fundamentally not a free-for-all blank canvas.
What do you mean? If I can drag and drop, can I just put things wherever I want?
No, and for very good reason.
Yeah.
When you initialize that page, your first action is establishing the base layout, and you are immediately forced to operate within a strict grid layout. Specifically, you can build up to 6 columns per section on that page. Everything you drag and drop must snap into that underlying mathematical grid.
Okay, so I have this invisible 6-column grid. How do I actually populate it?
You populate the grid using the Add Content widget catalog. And as an architect, knowing what is inside this catalog is like a carpenter knowing their toolkit. It is an extensive palette of functional blocks.
Let's actually talk about some of the most critical widgets in that catalog. I know the sources list a ton of them. Tiles, application groups, images, polls, people widgets for highlighting team members, slideshows, tasks, events. It's a lot. But I want to focus on the difference between a standard widget like a text block or a multimedia video player and a UI integration card. Because the sources treat UI cards like they are the holy grail of this platform. What is the fundamental technical difference?
It is the difference between displaying static information and surfacing operational intelligence. A standard widget, say a text widget or an image widget, is entirely static. It only displays the exact content that an administrator manually typed or uploaded into it. It's like a poster on a wall. It might look nice, but it doesn't actually do anything.
Right. So if Weezer's Inc. posts a video about a new refrigeration unit, that's just a multimedia widget. It just sits there and plays the video.
Exactly. But UI integration cards are fundamentally different architecture. They do not just display what you typed. UI integration cards actively surface live, dynamic business data from back-end systems directly onto the front-end work page.
Walk me through exactly how that works for Nils. Let's say he needs to know the current quarterly revenue for a specific client to decide if he can offer a discount.
Sure. If you used a static text widget, an admin would have to log in every Friday, check the revenue in the accounting software, and type it into the box. It would be outdated instantly.
Right. Totally useless for live decisions.
But with a UI integration card, the card itself is configured with a secure API connection, often utilizing a JSON payload, that reaches all the way back into the core SAP S/4HANA system.
Wow, it reaches straight into the enterprise database.
Yes. The card continuously pulls the backend. So when Nils loads that work page on a Tuesday afternoon, the UI card instantly pulls the absolute latest up-to-the-second revenue numbers from S/4HANA and renders them as a beautiful interactive chart right there on his page. It is surfacing the backend directly to the front end.
Meaning Nils never actually has to log into the complex S/4HANA interface just to find a single number.
Exactly. He gets the data without having to learn the massive backend software.
That is incredible. But I have a major concern here regarding the design of these pages. The risk of what I would call widget soup.
Widget soup.
Yeah, let me paint a picture. You are handing an administrator an incredibly powerful 120-piece tool set, but you aren't forcing them to read an instruction manual on graphic design. You just dump this massive catalog of feeds, polls, slideshows, tag clouds, and live UI cards in front of them. Sure, they might build a beautifully streamlined dashboard for Nils, but they are equally likely to build a chaotic, blindingly colorful mess with 5 different live feeds competing for visual attention, resulting in a page that is completely unusable. How does this system prevent terrible design?
It is exactly why the 6-column grid exists. The grid is not an arbitrary limitation to annoy you. It is a vital architectural safeguard.
How does a grid stop someone from making an ugly page, though?
By forcing the creator to think in terms of structural visual hierarchy and, crucially, by enabling mathematically predictable, responsive design.
Responsive design meaning how it looks on different devices, like laptops versus phones.
Precisely. If the work page editor were just a free-floating canvas where you could drag a poll widget to the exact pixel coordinate of, x.400, y.800, it might look fine on your massive ultra-wide desktop monitor. But the second Nils tries to open that exact same work page on his iPhone while standing on a factory floor, the free-floating canvas would be a catastrophic overlapping disaster.
Because the system wouldn't know how to resize it automatically.
Right, but because the system knows that every single widget is mathematically locked into a maximum of 6 columns, the underlying CSS grid logic knows exactly how to gracefully degrade and stack those columns. It knows that on a tablet, maybe it drops to 3 columns. On a smartphone, it stacks everything perfectly into one vertical column. The grid enforces design discipline so the content is always readable, no matter the device.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, so we've dragged and dropped, we've built the structure, we've placed our beautiful UI cards on the grid to pull live data. We know it will look great on an iPhone. But we still have a problem. We have an empty house. Populating these pages with meaningful text writing, the welcome messages, typing out the summaries of company policies, drafting the explanations for how the UI cards work, that is incredibly tedious, time-consuming, busy work for an administrator.
It is the absolute worst part of enterprise management.
Yeah.
It's what drains productivity and causes the dreaded blank page syndrome. When a brilliant systems architect is forced to sit and stare at an empty text widget for an hour because they have to draft 3 paragraphs explaining a new IT security protocol with the correct corporate tone.
Which brings us to the integration of AI as the co-developer. SAP Build Work Zone embeds artificial intelligence, specifically SAP Joule, directly into the work page creation and maintenance workflow.
Yes, this capability is specifically engineered to eliminate that exact busy work you just described.
So, as the architect building this page, what is my action item? How do I actually use it? Do I have to open up a separate browser tab, log into an LLM chatbot, prompt it, and then copy and paste the text back into SAP?
No, and that is the critical architectural distinction here. The AI is embedded directly into the platform. When you are in edit mode on a work page and you drop a text widget onto the grid, you don't just stare at the cursor, you click the AI icon that exists directly within the text editor toolbar.
And then what?
You generate draft content using natural language prompts right there in the widget. You just type, draft a workspace welcome message for the new European refrigeration customer service team, outlining our goals for Q3. And Joule generates the entire structural draft instantly right on the page.
Okay, generation is great, but what if the draft is technically accurate, but it sounds like it was written by a robot lawyer? What if Weezer's Inc. has a very casual corporate culture?
Then you utilize the second major capability, which is content refinement. You don't have to rewrite it yourself. You highlight that freshly generated text, click the embedded AI icon again, and apply a refinement command to explicitly modify the tone. You can instruct Joule to shift the tone from highly formal to friendly and casual, or you can tell it to translate the text or make it more concise. It manipulates the text you already have.
So it writes the text and it refines the tone. But the sources point out a third major capability that doesn't just apply to writing text boxes. It applies to managing massive documents. Let's say Weizer's Inc. has a 400-page PDF detailing the new international compliance standards for industrial refrigerants. No one wants to read that.
Literally no one has the time to read that. So an administrator navigates to the workspace content folder, opens that massive multi-page document right inside the SAP document viewer, and executes the AI summarization command.
And the AI just reads the PDF.
It processes the entire document and instantly extracts the key compliance points, generating a highly readable summary that you can then pin to the top of the workspace.
Now, I have to stop and ask about the workflow implication of this. Why is it so important that this AI is embedded directly in the editor and the document viewer, rather than just being a chat window on the side of the screen?
Because of contextual awareness. When you open a separate chat window on a different website, the AI is a blank slate. It doesn't know who you are, it doesn't know what workspace you're in, and it certainly doesn't know what a 400-page PDF sitting on a secure server actually says.
Right.
But because Joule is deeply embedded into the native SAP architecture, its context window automatically includes the metadata of where it is operating. It knows it is summarizing a document inside the highly secure Weizer's engineering workspace. It is operating with full awareness of the environment.
But let me ask you a philosophical question about the depth of this AI. We're calling it a co-developer. Is this AI acting as the lead architect who actually designs the structural integrity of the house? Or is it just the interior designer who picks out the nice curtains, fluffs the pillows, and arranges the furniture?
That is actually the perfect analogy for understanding its current role. The AI is absolutely the interior designer. It handles the decor, the content generation, the tedious tone modification, the summarization of the boring compliance documents. It makes the space livable and welcoming. But it explicitly leaves the human user to be the structural architect.
The human still has to decide that the 6-column layout is necessary. The human still has to decide which specific UI integration cards need to connect to S/4HANA to pull the revenue data.
Exactly. The human focuses on structural logic, business process routing, and the high-level decision-making of what the department actually needs to function. The AI cannot tell you that Nils needs a specific S/4HANA dashboard, only you know that. But if we look at the long-term workflow implication, this fundamentally shifts the administrator's job description.
How so?
You're no longer a glorified content writer just churning out paragraphs for the company intranet. You are elevated to a content curator and a strategic systems architect. Your primary job is to orchestrate the flow of raw data and business logic, while the AI fills in the prose to make it readable.
Okay, let's step back and look at the skyscraper we've built so far. We have a pristine site menu directing traffic flawlessly. We have Workpages structured beautifully on a mathematically perfect 6-column grid. We have UI cards placed on the pages. We have AI generating our text so the spaces look fully populated and welcoming. But if we haven't actually connected those UI cards to the real business data in the back end, we essentially just built a very pretty, very useless storefront with completely empty shelves.
It is a facade. It looks like enterprise software, but it does absolutely nothing.
Which means we have to walk into the engine room. We need to actually wire this beautiful front end to the SAP backend. And the sources outline 3 distinct integration scenarios that an architect must understand to execute business processes seamlessly: manual integration, content federation, and content packages.
Yes. Let's break down exactly how an architect executes these, because choosing the wrong one will cripple your system scalability.
Let's start with manual integration.
If I have to perform a manual integration for a new app, what am I physically doing in the system as an action item? You are doing the heavy lifting yourself. You open the content manager, and you manually add the application entity. You have to individually configure the single sign-on protocols, likely mapping SAML assertions yourself. You have to manually set the specific URL parameters so the app knows where to point, and then you deploy it via the site manager.
It sounds incredibly tedious, like hand wiring a single light fixture. What is the alternative?
The alternative and the absolute gold standard for modern SAP landscapes is content federation.
How does content federation work technically?
In federation, you aren't building the app connections one by one in Work Zone. Instead, you configure a single, highly secure connection to a content provider. That provider could be your massive SAP S/4HANA cloud system or a sprawling on-premise backend. The architectural goal here is to expose the massive catalog of roles and applications that already exist in that backend provider and pull them directly into Work Zone without having to rebuild a single one of them.
Let me use an analogy here to see if I grasp the scale. Manual integration feels like you are a massive factory and you are choosing to hand wire every single light bulb one by one, tracing every wire all the way back to the main breaker box. If a wire breaks, you have to trace it through the walls. Content federation feels like you just paid the city to plug the entire factory directly into the municipal power grid and you flipped a giant switch. The power is already generated. You are just exposing your factory to it.
That is exactly right. It's plugging into the grid.
So why in the world would an architect ever choose to manually wire a light bulb if they could just plug into the municipal grid? If federation is so scalable, why does manual integration even exist as an option?
Because the world of enterprise IT is messy, and you will always have edge cases. Federation is brilliant because it separates the content exposure step, which S/4HANA handles by saying, here are my apps, from the content consumption step in Work Zone. But what if Wisers, Inc. has a highly customized 10-year-old third-party web app that handles a very niche part of their supply chain logistics in Eastern Europe?
It probably doesn't support modern SAP federation protocols, right?
Exactly. It can't talk to the municipal grid. The grid doesn't recognize it. So for those one-off legacy systems, you have to get your hands dirty. You have to use manual integration to hand wire it into Work Zone using custom URLs and manual SSO so Nils can still access it. Manual exists for flexibility when standard exposure fails.
Okay, what about the third integration type? Content packages.
Content packages are typically used for highly customized front-end deployments. You use a separate developer environment like SAP Business Application Studio to actually write and create a collection of custom items, like uniquely coded UI5 cards. The developer zips all those assets into a single ZIT file package, and you deploy that entire package into SAP Build Work Zone all at once.
Okay, so the applications are integrated, the shelves are stocked, but business isn't just about Nils looking at a dashboard of revenue. It's about Nils taking action based on that data. He needs to approve things, delete things, modify things.
And a UI card can't do that on its own. This brings us to a deeply technical architectural concept: API encapsulation.
API encapsulation. Explain how that works in this environment.
To allow Nils to interact with the backend without leaving his work page, the administrator must configure actions in the system library. These actions essentially act as secure wrappers. They encapsulate specific backend API commands.
The sources give very specific examples of standard API commands as action items. Can we walk through them?
Certainly. You might configure an action that executes a GET command. In REST API terms, GET is a read request. So when Nils clicks a button to view a customer's history, that action sends a GET command pulling a sales order directly from SAP S/4HANA Cloud and displays it on his screen.
What if he needs to add something new?
Then you configure an action utilizing a appeased command. Appeased command creates new data. So perhaps an HR manager is using a work page and clicks Add Employee. That action fires a POS command to SAP SuccessFactors, instantly creating a new candidate profile in the backend database.
And presumably, a delete command does exactly what it sounds like, removing an entity from a third-party application. So these encapsulated API actions are the invisible hands doing the actual work when a user clicks a button.
Exactly. Think about what this means for Nils' daily workflow. Before this, he had to open a new tab, log into S4 Icon, navigate the complex menus to find the sales order, then open another tab, log into SuccessFactors to check on the technician assigned to the order.
Such a pain.
Right. Now, the Work Zone executes those specific API actions quietly in the background, based entirely on the simple UI buttons he's clicking on his dashboard.
But wait, the system has the power to pull data and delete data. But how does it know when it is allowed to execute those actions? If Nils clicks Approve 20% discount, how does the API know if Nils is actually authorized to do that? You can't just let APIs run wild.
No, you absolutely cannot. That requires business logic. And this is the final, most complex layer of the engine room: mapping decision logic.
How do you build logic into an API?
You don't. And that is a crucial point. You do not hard-code the business logic into the API action itself. You model the business rules entirely separately, in a different layer of the architecture.
The sources break this down into a very specific hierarchy of logic. Can we walk through the components?
Yes. At the very top, you utilize the overarching capability simply called decisions. This is the platform tool used to model and manage complex business logic.
And underneath a decision, you have policies.
Correct. A policy is essentially a grouped collection of specific rules that apply to a particular business scenario, like a European discount policy.
To build those policies, the sources mention decision diagrams and decision tables. What is the difference?
A decision diagram is the visual representation of the logic. It's literally a flowchart. You build it to show the execution path from the initial input, say, Nils requesting a discount, to the final output, like approved or denied, showing every step along the way.
And the decision table?
The decision table is where the actual math happens. It is a tabular format, much like a spreadsheet, that maps specific inputs to outputs using raw if-then text rules. For example, a row in the table might literally dictate, if user role equals manager and DIF discount requested is less than 15%, then output equals approved.
So as an architect, what is the actual benefit of building this massive hierarchy of decisions, policies, flowcharts, and tables? Why not just have a developer write a quick Python script that says, if Nils asks for a discount, say yes, and hard-code it straight into the UI button?
Because enterprise business logic is never static. It changes constantly. Tax rates fluctuate. Executive approval thresholds are lowered during a bad quarter. International compliance rules update overnight. If you hard-code that logic into the UI button or the API script,
then every time the tax rate changes, you have to bring in a developer to rewrite the core code of your platform. And you risk breaking the entire API connection to S/4HANA just to change a number from 15% to 10%.
Exactly. It's a maintenance nightmare. But by utilizing this specific SAP hierarchy, you achieve a brilliant architectural separation of concerns. The engine, the API action, stays exactly the same. It just knows how to connect to S/4HANA. The navigation coordinates the decision table sit in a separate layer. So when the CA says, no more 15% discounts, drop it to 10%, an administrator simply opens the decision table, changes the number 15 to a 10 in a spreadsheet cell, and hits save.
The underlying code is never touched.
Never touched. The business logic changes instantly across the entire enterprise, safely and securely.
Okay, let's take a breath. We have a fully functioning digital skyscraper now. The navigational directory works perfectly, the presentation offices are built on a responsive grid, the AI has decorated the space with perfect text, the building is securely wired into the municipal power grid of S/4HANA, and it's running complex decision logic to execute tasks. Data's flowing everywhere.
But if data is flowing everywhere, we have a massive security problem. Who is actually allowed in which office?
Which brings us to the next vital phase, structuring and securing the workspaces. We have to define the digital borders.
Workspaces are the functional, collaborative hubs of SAP Build Work Zone, and they are governed by incredibly strict access protocols tied directly to user personas.
Our sources explicitly define 4 distinct user personas that govern this entire matrix. As an architect, you have to know exactly what these personas can and cannot do. Let's break them down.
The highest level is the internal admin. These individuals have the literal keys to the kingdom. They manage the global site menu, they create new workspaces from scratch, and they configure the deep platform settings.
Next down is the internal key user.
A key user has elevated privileges, but they aren't running the whole system. They can create workspaces for their specific departments and add content to them, but they cannot touch the overarching site administration or the global menu routing.
Then we have the internal end user. This is nils, at least initially.
Right. End users are primarily consumers of the architecture. They log in to utilize the platform for their daily operational tasks. They can only see and access the specific workspaces to which they have been explicitly invited or assigned. The rest of the company is basically invisible to them.
And finally, we have external users. These are people who are not legally employed by Wisers, Inc. Maybe it's a vendor who supplies the raw copper for the refrigeration coils, or an external marketing consultant.
The security parameters for external users are airtight. They are strictly confined to the exact workspaces they are invited to. They cannot browse the global directory. They often only have access to a single external-facing menu item or just their own profile settings.
So knowing those personas, when an administrator actually goes to generate a new workspace, the very first choice they have to make is defining the workspace type. And there are 3 options.
The first choice is My Workspace. This is a highly personal dashboard, visible only to the individual user.
The second choice is a public workspace.
A public workspace is discoverable. Anyone in the company can search for it and see it exists. Depending on how you configure the granular settings, it can be open to non-members, often in a read-only mode. A perfect example of a public workspace is the Central IT Support Center or the Corporate HR Policy Hub. You want people to find it easily.
And the third choice is a private workspace.
This is your secure vault. A private workspace is strictly invite-only. Furthermore, it is completely hidden from the global search function for anyone who is not a member. If you search for it, it returns 0 results. You use this for highly sensitive collaborative areas like the Executive Board's Q3 financial planning room or a secure project team developing an unannounced product.
Now, once you decide on the type, the sources highly recommend that administrators utilize the administration console to generate custom workspace templates rather than building every workspace manually. Why are templates so critical?
It comes down to consistency, governance, and sheer speed. Imagine Wisers, Inc. launches 50 new engineering projects a year. Every single one of those project teams needs a workspace. They all need a taskboard widget, they all need a secure document folder for CAD files, and they all need a specific UI integration card pulling budget data from S4HANA.
If an admin has to drag and drop all of that 50 times, that's a nightmare.
And they will inevitably make a mistake on one of them, creating a security flaw. Instead, the architect builds the perfect, secure engineering workspace layout exactly once. They save that entire structure as a custom workspace template. Now, whenever a new project launches, they deploy the template, and the workspace is spun up instantly, perfectly configured, and fully compliant with corporate standards.
You can also configure sub-workspaces for incredibly complex multi-tiered projects. But the sources highlight a vital, unbending security rule here. Users absolutely must be members of the parent workspace to even be granted access to this sub-workspace.
It inherits the security boundary of its parent. You cannot have a backdoor into a subfolder if you aren't allowed in the main room.
Speaking of security boundaries, there is a mandatory security configuration that every admin must ensure is active when dealing with external vendors. Whenever an external user, a non-employee, is granted access to any public or private workspace, The system is designed to display a persistent, highly visible warning banner across every single screen of that specific workspace.
It is a constant, undismissible visual reminder to the internal employees. It essentially screams, hey, be very careful what you type in this forum and be very careful what files you upload. People from outside the company are sitting in this room.
Right, it prevents those casual accidental data leaks where an engineer accidentally posts an unreleased schematic into a chat because they forgot the copper vendor was in the workspace.
Exactly. It forces situational awareness.
Now, I want to circle back and push back on one of those workspace types, my workspace, the personal dashboard. Let's look at this from the user's perspective. If I am Nils, I have been using computers for 20 years. I have a highly customized Windows desktop. I have a Google Chrome browser that is meticulously organized with folders and bookmarks for every single web app, SAP portal, and vendor site I need. Why on earth would I spend an hour configuring a redundant My Workspace inside this SAP ecosystem? Isn't it just a glorified list of bookmarks that I already have?
It's a very common objection from veteran employees, but it completely misunderstands the architectural depth of the platform. My Workspace is definitively not a list of URLs pointing to other places. It integrates directly with internal platform capabilities that a standard web browser fundamentally cannot access.
Give me a concrete example of what it can do that Chrome can't.
Let's talk about SAP Task Center, which integrates directly into My Workspace. Let's say Niels is a busy manager. In a given morning, he might have a purchase order waiting for his approval inside SAP Ariba. He has a team member's vacation request waiting in SAP SuccessFactors, and he has a critical supply chain alert sitting inside S4ADA.
If he relies on browser bookmarks, he has to click the Ariba bookmark, log in, approve it, log out. Click the SuccessFactors bookmark, log in, approve it, log out.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's wildly inefficient. But SAP Task Center talks to all of those back-end systems via APIs, extracts the actionable tasks, and aggregates every single one of them into one unified actionable list directly on his My Workspace page. He can click Approve on an Ariba PO and approve on a SuccessFactors vacation request from the exact same interface without ever launching those underlying applications. A browser bookmark cannot aggregate cross-platform data.
That is a massive productivity shift. And the sources also detail how My Workspace centralizes communication through personalized feed updates.
Yes, the feeds are another thing a browser cannot replicate. The architecture explicitly defines 3 distinct feed types that aggregate into the user experience. First, you have the company feed. This is broadcast communication. It pushes public, corporate-wide status updates from HR or the CEO. Everyone sees these.
Then you have the Workspace feed.
This is localized. It contains updates, forum posts, and document uploads strictly from the members within one specific workspace that you are currently viewing.
And the third type is the home feed.
The home feed is the ultimate aggregator for the individual. It algorithmically pulls relevant updates from every single workspace you are a member of and combines it with updates from any specific colleagues you have chosen to follow. It creates a completely personalized real-time timeline of operational data and human communication. When you combine that dynamic feed with the aggregated SAP Task Center and your live UI cards, well, My Workspace ceases to be a list of links. It becomes a personalized operational command center.
Okay, you've convinced me. It's an aggregator of actions, not just a map of locations. So we've structured the workspaces, we've locked down the access permissions, we've set up the warning banners for externals, and we've empowered the individual with a command center.
But a command center is only as good as the intelligence flowing through it.
Which brings us to the final critical phase of our deep dive: knowledge management and advanced user settings. Once the collaborative spaces are built and secured, you have to manage the actual intellectual property that is being generated by the humans inside them.
And you have to give those users the tools to control their micro-interactions with that data.
The individual experience is largely governed by the global header bar, which sits at the very top of the screen above the primary site menu.
And managing this ecosystem requires a series of very specific configurations for both the workspace modules and those header bar settings.
Let's start with how Wisers, Inc. actually retains its knowledge. Inside any given workspace, an administrator must configure the knowledge base, or KB, section. When you enable the KB, you aren't just creating a folder. You are enabling form-based article creation.
It provides a structured authoring environment. Users can write with rich text, they can directly embed instructional multimedia videos, and crucially, they can utilize predefined templates to ensure every single troubleshooting guide looks exactly the same.
And there are lifecycle management tools built into this right now. You can set up delayed publishing so an article about a new product only goes live on launch day. And you can configure explicit expiry dates.
The expiry dates are vital for compliance. If a refrigeration safety protocol is only valid for the 2026 calendar year, you set it to expire on December 31st. On January 1st, it automatically disappears from the search index, guaranteeing that NILS will never accidentally quote an outdated, illegal safety policy to a customer.
Now remember back when we were building the site menu, we discussed the predefined company-wide knowledge base link.
Right. If you enable that global link, it reaches down into all these individual workspace KBs, assuming the workspace is public, and pulls all those polished articles up to the global search level.
Now, here is a crucial architectural distinction that administrators absolutely must train their users on. Distinguishing the knowledge base from the content section. They sound like the same thing, but functionally, they are entirely different.
They serve completely different purposes in the life cycle of information. How would you categorize them?
Think about it like this. The knowledge base is a beautifully published, highly curated encyclopedia. It is polished, it is final, it is formatted cleanly, and it is considered the absolute source of truth. The forums, which we'll talk about next, are the bustling, noisy town square. That's where people argue about how to fix a problem or brainstorm a new idea. And the content section, that is literally just the messy metal filing cabinet shoved in the back corner of the office where someone dumps a massive ZIP file of 50 raw PDFs and random spreadsheets.
That is a flawless categorization. The KB is for finalized best practices. The forums are for the messy human process of arriving at those best practices. And the sources dictate that administrators have to explicitly enable specific forum types to match the intent. Questions for Q&A, ideas for brainstorming and voting, and discussions for open-ended debate. And you are exactly right about the content section. It is merely a raw file repository for bulk storage, not for living documents.
To make that town square forum actually function efficiently, you have to train your users on specific communication commands so people actually see the messages.
Yes, in a massive enterprise, screaming into the void doesn't work. You must explicitly teach users to type @mention followed by a name to send a direct, targeted notification to a specific colleague whose expertise is needed. And for critical updates, they use the @notify command to blast a broader alert to an entire group or workspace.
But in a company the size of Weisers Inc., with hundreds of active forums and thousands of encyclopedia articles, how do people actually find the best information? How do they not drown in the noise?
That is where the recommendations engine comes into play. We briefly touched on it as a predefined menu item earlier, but its underlying mechanics are fascinating.
How does it actually work?
Recommendations are the platform's algorithmic antidote to information overload. The system silently and continuously analyzes behavioral telemetry data across the entire platform. It tracks what articles people like, what forum posts generate the most comments, who follows whom, and what documents are bookmarked the most frequently.
Oh, it's analyzing the digital body language of the company.
Precisely. And based on that massive data set, it dynamically surfaces the most relevant, highly rated, useful content from the KB and the forums, presenting it directly to the user. And it curates this at both the micro level, showing what's trending inside a specific workspace, and the macro level, via the company-wide recommendations on the main site menu.
So it's algorithmically surfacing the best stuff based on what the employees themselves actually find useful, rather than an admin manually pinning articles.
Yes. And if we tie this sophisticated knowledge management back to the AI capabilities we discussed earlier, SAP Joule, this is where the architecture becomes incredibly powerful. Joule isn't just generating polite welcome text. It can be used for deep knowledge discovery and document grounding directly against this curated knowledge base.
Document grounding. Explain exactly what that means in this context.
When you go to a public AI on the internet and ask it a technical question, it guesses the answer based on its vast generic training data. It might be right, it might hallucinate. In an enterprise environment, a hallucination can cost millions of dollars. Document grounding ensures that when a user asks Joule a question, Joule is strictly constrained. It is grounded in your specific corporate encyclopedia.
It's not allowed to guess.
Right. It executes a retrieval-augmented generation process. It searches the validated knowledge base articles and secure content stored inside Work Zone, retrieves the exact corporate policy, and synthesizes that specific data into an answer.
That is a massive paradigm shift for Nils. Instead of spending 20 minutes searching through the customer service workspace folders to find the German warranty policy for a specific coil, he just types into Joule, "What is the warranty protocol for the X900 refrigeration coil in Germany?" And Joule reads the exact, localized Weiser's Inc. policy from the knowledge base, and hands him the exact answer in 3 seconds.
That is the ultimate realization of a truly intelligent digital workspace. But before we get completely swept away by the AI revolution, we have one final vital set of configurations regarding the header bar settings, because the human still needs to control their environment.
Right, the personal controls. Up in the header bar, users access their avatar dropdown. This is the centralized location where they configure their personal theme and display settings like dark mode, set up their personal application catalogs for quick access to their most used tools, and define their preferred language and localized date-time formats. This is also where a user configures their away alerts when they go on vacation.
And finally, we have to talk about notifications. There is a native notification center, the classic bell icon in the header, and the system sends configurable email notifications so users know when they are @mentioned or assigned a task.
But the sources outline a very specific advanced configuration for architects regarding notifications.
Yes. For a truly massive integrated enterprise, having a bell icon in Work Zone and a different bell icon in S/4HANA and a third bell icon in SuccessFactors is maddening. The advanced configuration allows the architect to actually disable the native Work Zone notifications entirely.
Why would you turn them off?
So you can route all of those alerts through the central SAP notification service. By funneling everything into one master service, you create a truly unified nervous system for the enterprise. The user gets one aggregated stream of alerts, no matter what SAP application they happen to be looking at.
Okay. Let's take a major step back and look at the sheer scope of the architecture we have unpacked over the last hour. We started with a messy, disconnected, frustrating reality. We had Nils completely drowning in scattered customer data, isolated from his colleagues, and struggling to execute basic tasks.
And through deliberate, step-by-step architectural design, we built him a lifeline.
We did. We started at the very beginning by structuring the site menu directory, understanding the critical difference between horizontal and vertical layouts, mapping complex routing logic, and rigorously transporting those configurations from development to production to prevent chaos.
Then we physically constructed the interface. We initialized Workpages and snapped everything into a strict, mathematically predictable 6-column grid to ensure responsive design and prevent widget soup. We integrated UI cards to surface live, pulling data straight from the backend.
We brought in SAP Joule as our embedded AI co-developer to banish the blank page syndrome. We used it to generate structural text, automatically refine corporate tone, and instantly summarize massive 400-page compliance PDFs so the human administrators could focus on high-level architecture.
We ventured deep into the engine room. We wired the beautiful front end to the core SAP systems. We mapped out complex decision logic, separating the API commands from the policies and decision tables so our systems can adapt to changing business rules without breaking the code. We learned exactly when to hand-wire a legacy app with manual integration and when to plug the whole enterprise into the municipal grid using Content Federation.
We drew strict digital borders, defining personas and securing public, private, and My Workspaces. We ensured external users are clearly flagged with undismissible warning banners to prevent data leaks, and we optimized the flow of daily information through aggregated, personalized feeds and the SAP Task Center.
And finally, we organized the raw intellectual capital of the entire company. We separated the polished, expiring articles of the knowledge base from the noisy debates of the forums and the messy file dumping of the content cabinets. We enabled powerful AI document grounding to make that knowledge instantly accessible and empowered users to control their own experience via the global header bar.
That is an incredibly comprehensive, deeply technical journey. That is not just talking about software. That is how you actually master SAP Build Work Zone and fundamentally change how a company operates.
It's the literal transition from a reactive, fragmented state of panic to a proactive, unified, intelligent enterprise architecture.
But as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a final, forward-looking thought to chew on. We've talked extensively today about the power of AI Joule generating text, refining tone, summarizing massive PDFs, and strictly grounding its answers in your secure corporate knowledge base. But right now, in the architecture we just built, the human user is still the initiator. Nils still has to physically navigate the site menu to find a workspace. He still has to open a work page and look at the UI cards.
That is true. The human is still driving the interaction, even if the road is much smoother.
So here is a provocative technical challenge for you to ponder as you architect the future of your own SAP environments. As SAP Joule becomes more deeply integrated into the fundamental, invisible back-end infrastructure, what happens when the concept of the digital workspace transitions from a static destination where you go to find applications and instead becomes an autonomous, intelligent agent?
Wait, what do you mean by autonomous?
Well, what happens when Joule dynamically generates a temporary, highly personalized work page, literally on the fly, entirely from scratch based on a specific S/4HANA supply chain anomaly that the system detected while you were sleeping? What if, the moment Nils logs in, he doesn't see a menu? He sees a bespoke page presenting him with the exact UI cards, the specific decision logic buttons, and the relevant collaborative forum threads he needs to solve that exact unique problem that morning. And when the problem is solved, the page simply dissolves.
Wow, that is a staggering thought that completely shatters the current definition of a workspace. It's no longer a predefined room you walk into. It's a dynamic, context-aware interface that builds itself around the problem of the day and then disappears.
Just remember, when the diagnostic muddy waters of enterprise IT finally clear, you don't just want an X-ray showing you exactly what's broken. You want an architecture that automatically hands you the exact tools you need to fix it. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. We'll catch you next time.